Let's jump in. We are in the third week, as you've noticed with our pyrotechnics over here. This is about as flashy as we get around here. You won't see any crazy lights or fog machines, but you will see candles at Christmas time. And so we are third week of He Will Be Called, and we're working through the passage in Isaiah 9 where Isaiah gives this prophecy and he says, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor. And we looked at Wonderful Counselor and we kind of dug into that, given the historical context, that the idea there, Wonderful Counselor sounds really nice, but the idea is more like an extraordinary, divinely gifted strategist as it comes to battle and fighting, because Israel is in the midst of a civil war and Assyria is encroaching in, and right before this passage we find the other Emmanuel passage in Isaiah 7 where Isaiah goes out and meets the king at the aqueduct as he's kind of prepping to make sure that they have enough water to last the siege that might be coming. And so Isaiah turns around and says, no, the king that will come, this king, he will be the Wonderful Counselor. He will be the strategist that has divine intelligence that can see beyond just what you see and hear here. And then the next week we talk about Mighty God, the reality that most of us want, how should I say it? Most of us don't like the fact that God is mighty enough to say, in my might, I will come and be born as you. I will become the created thing. That somebody that is so mighty can step into the reality and be someone that had to have somebody changed his diaper, somebody fed him food, somebody wiped the puke from the side of his mouth after he got sick and started burping. Somebody taught him how to read, how to write, how to be a carpenter, how to do all of these different things. That we have somebody that, while is a mighty God, is one that we can intimately relate with because he was and experienced the same struggles that we have. Even in those intimate moments of you think God doesn't hear your prayer, Jesus was right there in the garden and said, God, take this cup from me. And the answer was no. Sometimes we don't like those answers, but that shows us an intimate view of God as mighty. And now this week, we will jump in and look at God as everlasting Father. So I'm going to pray. You can prep yourself, turn to Isaiah 9. We'll get in there in a minute. I'm going to tell you a few stories before we jump in, just kind of get us in the right frame of mind. And I will tell you, my morning routine is I get up around 5, a little before 5, I go to the gym and I prep. So I have my telephone with my notes on it, which is really kind of the scripture passage and a few bullets here or there of things that I want to be reminded of. And then I do a little cardio and I get things done, and then I go and I lift weights. Sunday is legs day. So I didn't get to do the lifting weights portion this morning because I didn't get through the thinking portion. So I'm going to try and cut a few things here as we go along so that we can still have a coherent flow, but it doesn't distract from the story that Isaiah is telling. So I invite you to pray with me and we will jump in. Spirit, I ask that in the midst of a busy season, in the midst of coming and going and things happening with family members, things happening within our own congregation, things happening on the news and here and there, and all sorts of things kind of pulling us in one way or another, I pray that you would help us be centered this morning, that we can quiet the outside world, that we can press pause on the busyness, the angst, the what-ifs, the next, the things that we're going to do this afternoon, and that we would truly be present here. And in our presence, you would honor us with yours, that your words would speak just as they did 2,700 years ago, that Isaiah's words would be more than just things written on a papyrus thousands of years ago, but they would be things and words that are written today on our hearts and minds. So here in this place, Lord, we ask that you would speak. Amen. First thing I need you to do is imagine sitting on the bench seat, old pickup truck, in the middle. Not in your own seat, but you're in the middle. And it has one of those four-wheel drive gear shifts that's down on the ground that you have to reach to, not those new fancy buttons that you push nowadays. You run your hands along the black and gray carpet-ish kind of woven fabric that's over top of the seat. You reach forward and you push in the little silver button. But it's not really a button, it's more like a lever. And the little needle jumps and the music starts. You can hear the engine, whoa, and you look back and you see the full Demco wagon. And as a little kid, you think, why are we pulling a wagon with a pickup truck? But you just sit down and you watch the road, and then it comes. The old weathered hand to the knee as you're not paying attention. How's old kid? Good. You're driving along in your car now. Years later, you pull into the driveway, the long gravel driveway, and you know just the right time to kill the lights and put the car in neutral so it quietly coasts in. You know what I'm talking about? And you push the button for the garage door just at the right perfect time so you don't have to put the car back in gear and it just coasts right into the garage. You close the door of the car holding the lever up and not just shoving it closed. That's all it is. You creep inside. You go up the steps, which are a little noisy, but you think it's okay. You make it through the kitchen, and then you hear the click. You know what I'm talking about? Sounds like that, but it's the turn of the little switch on the light bulb in between the two chairs. And you breathe in deep, and he says, "Come and have a seat." You look at the clock at the microwave and you're like, well, it's way past midnight. You sit down and you see lazy boy, Bible on the lap, and a cup of coffee. And while it's been a long night for you, it's been a few hours of praying that you would come home safe for him. Fast forward a few more years. You find yourself at one of those big white wash basins, you know, it's a sink, but it's really like 2 feet wide and like 3 feet deep. And you're rubbing your hands with soap, but it's not really soap. It smells like oranges and it has gravel in it. And you're like, what in the world? And as you look, you realize that your fingernails are dark. And that's the moment that you think back to about an hour before, as he points at this thing and he says, now this right here, this nut is threaded backwards. Don't turn it the normal way or you'll break it. And at that point, all you can see is the black within the fingernails that is perma-black, like it never ever goes away. It creeps into the pores of the cracks of your fingers. You know what I'm talking about? And at that point, as you're washing your hands, you think, I never took a motorcycle all apart before. Hold on to that. Those are glimpses of fathers in my life. Hopefully you have a few glimpses of fathers in your life. We're going to jump into Isaiah, and I'm going to read the full of the passage, but then we'll jump in specifically to the everlasting Father portion, and then we'll kind of dissect a few things from there. Isaiah 9:1. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. This is the area, remember, that's just up near the Sea of Galilee. This is the areas of what would later be Nazareth, where Jesus is from, and Capernaum and the northern side of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus does a number of his miracles and ministry. We will honor Galilee of the nations by way of the sea beyond the Jordan. And remember here, we're talking in past tense. So as he writes, Isaiah writes, in the past he humbled, but in the future he will honor. What he's really doing is he's writing everything in the past tense because he knows it's so sure that he can project it into the future. It's a rhetorical device of rather than saying this will come to pass, he says it as if it already happened so that in their day they would hear it and go, what are you talking about? Like, that hasn't happened yet. But to him, because he has seen this, as God has spoke into him, it is so sure that he speaks of it as past tense, happened already. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those living in the land of deep darkness, the darkness of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people at the harvest. We can get that. They rejoice as warriors when dividing the plunder, for as in the days of Midian's defeat, and we talked about this last week with mighty God, as in we see in Midian's day, this is the Battle of Gideon, where Gideon takes his 22,000 and then 10,000 and then 300, and you saw the craziness with the light bulb and the horn and all that, and they stand and they face down over 100,000 Midianites, that God's might is one like here in the defeat of Midian. When you shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar that's across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors, every warrior's boot in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forevermore. For the zeal of the Lord Almighty, the commander of the heavenly armies, you should hear, will accomplish this. Now, when we zoom in on Everlasting Father, it is an odd Hebrew word where it takes the word that we know of everlasting and a word that is Father, and it sticks them together, which you could read it as, and his name will be Aviad. Well, that's not real helpful, but we have these two words, Av and Ad, but in the Hebrew it looks... Tim, can you put that next one up there? Maybe they can see it. So you can... I wrote it up there. You can see the Hebrew there, but you have to read it from the opposite direction. So you'd read it from the right to the left. So the first part is really an A and a B, but in specific context, the B sounds like a V. This is why Hebrew is weird. And then there's a little line there, a little like looks like a apostrophe. That's the word. Looks like an apostrophe. It's a Y, but we pronounce it like an I. And the next one is an A and a D. Now, when we look at this, the first part just means father. Period. Like there's really no other way to change it. You could say that this is a possessive thing of father and saying my father. Avi is a modern Hebrew way of saying my father, but that's not an ancient Hebrew way of saying things. Rather in construct, then we see the next word, odd, which is kind of odd. It means perpetuity. Does anybody use that word? I really like it. Personally, I like it better than everlasting because it has a different connotation. And so the point here is perpetuity or advancing time. So something that starts and continues or advances throughout. It can have a past tense effect. It can be continuing into the future or eternal or everlasting. Put the next one up there, and I've got a few. This is a possible ways that we could translate it as Father of Everlasting. When it's in construct, what we have is we flip it in English, but the way that it is you would say this of that. Father of everlasting is the literal Hebrew way, which we just say everlasting Father or eternal Father. Father of perpetuity, perpetual Father would be a good English way to say that. Father of forever, and then here we get to an idea that we'll jump into here in a second, is Isaiah's use of father as protector. Now, we think of father as just like the parent in the biblical sense of, and Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of, that it has this kind of connotation of being kind of the patriarch of something. But I don't think that's exactly the context that Isaiah is giving here. So here's where you should have the question: if Jesus is the Son, how can he be the everlasting Father? If you didn't have that question, then you haven't really been paying attention through all your years of Sunday school and catechism, because it is a very valid question. How would the Son be the Father? Well, he's not. Isaiah's not saying that Jesus is the Father. He's saying that he acts that way, that he is to us like a father. And specifically, we'll look here in a second at a passage immediately, kind of a few chapters later, where Isaiah is speaking to the people of Israel and uses father in two different ways. One way is as protector. So, and this is kind of I don't pick like rhyming words necessarily, but perpetual protector really sounded good to me, so I put that one there. That the aspect is that it continues on. It's not like I did something and it never happens again. It's not like the context that I think of when I think of everlasting. I just think forever and ever and ever and ever. No beginning, no end. But the point is there is something that happens and it has a rippling effect. That this isn't the word for forever and ever with no end necessarily that the Hebrew usually uses. This is the word for something happened and it continues to have effect. It continues to play a vital role in that person. So here we'll and maybe here's a good thing to think of. Isaiah's context is civil war. So think, you are the king in Israel, which is literally you're the king of Judah, the northern area of Israel. He's at war with them. They're partnering up with Syria. And Assyria, the big, bad, scary people that Jonah went to, are encroaching in on all of them. And so, do you need a father, or do you need someone that will protect you? He's speaking to their context. Or in the light of Gideon, where we see that he's giving all of these lists of an extraordinary strategist. Think the crazy things that happen at Midian's defeat. Anybody that's scared, tell those people to go home. Anybody that has to drink water with their face down into the pool of water and they can't use their hands and be dexterous, dude, that's not a very good word, that doesn't have the ability to use their hands very well because they're going to need to blow a trumpet, smash a pipe, smash a pot, and carry a torch all at the same time. They have to be able to multitask here. You send them home, and all he's left with is 300. That shows some might. That shows some strategy. And now it says, in the face of Gideon, because what happened with the judges? Does anybody remember? They didn't last very long. And then there was another one. 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 They didn't work out. They did things and they liberated the people locally, but then it didn't work so well. What you have here is a judge, a chieftain, a protector, a father that will perpetually be there. That isn't just there, fights a battle, and is gone. Think about how many times, those of you that have read through the book of 1st or 2nd Kings, where you go, and this king did poor, and this king did things in the sight of the Lord that wasn't good, and this king did good, but he didn't last very long. Now you have a king that will last. But in the way of protection, where maybe this will help you a little bit. Have any of you ever heard of the South Bend Shovel Slayer? No? Shaking your head no? Well, back in 58, they say he murdered his whole family in half the block. And now all he does is every time it snows, he salts the sidewalks. You following me? Some of you are like, no. Home Alone? The crazy old bearded guy that everybody's super scared of? Now you gotta give me a little leeway here. It's Christmas time. I'm trying to work in a Christmas movie here. They think he's scary. They think he's a bad guy. They think he's the South Bend shovel slayer. And he didn't do any of those things, but he quietly salts the sidewalks helping people. Scooping, shoveling, salting. And then in the moment when Kevin really, really, really needs help, he's there. Okay, that was kind of a stretch, but you... So let's jump back into Isaiah. I promise this one isn't a stretch. Isaiah 22, if you're following along, we're going to go verse 20 through 24. The context here is the great King Hezekiah and his royal, technically it's like royal vizier, but like a counselor, like somebody that gives him advice. Here's what you should think. So how many of you have seen the movie Aladdin? Aladdin? Yeah, you have kids. Some of you don't have kids. Okay. Arabian Nights. It was a play a really long time ago. Still not many of you. Well, there's a guy named Jafar. He's the royal vizier. He's the one that gives the information to the king. At that time, I will summon my servant, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. He is the royal vizier. He is the counselor to the king that gives him information, but the king is struggling because they are under siege. I will put your robe on him, tie your belt around him, transfer your authority to him. He will become, and here it's translated, a protector. The word is father. Exact same word that we see a few chapters earlier in Isaiah. He will become a father, protector of the residents of Jerusalem and the people of Judah. I will place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. When he opens the door, no one can close it. And when he closes the door, no one can open it. I will fasten him like a peg into a solid place. He will bring honor and respect to his father's name. His father's family will gain increasing prominence because of him, including the offspring and the offshoots. Now, here, the point that I'm bringing this up is Isaiah is using messianic figurative language as this advisor steps in as Hezekiah runs through his tunnel. He's staying safe, and this person says, I'll be there for you, Israel. And we see the use of the word father, as in your father's line, and we see the use of father as protector. I think the NIV still keeps the word father previously, but the root here underneath it is that he will protect the people. So here we see everlasting father, perpetual protector, that one that continues. Now the question is how the heck do we bring this to the Christmas story, right? How does perpetual protector, everlasting father, baby Jesus come into the Christmas story? Well, in order to see that, you have to ask yourself the question, who would know the situation, the background, the story, more intimately than anyone else besides God? In order to know this person or persons, plural, I don't even know that you would call them persons. They have names sometimes. Sometimes they're scary, sometimes they're not. They were there at the beginning when God said, let us make man in our image. And at that point, if I was an angel, I'd have been like, you're going to do what? I mean, we're kicking it good here. Why do you need to bring some more people in? You don't need them. Why are you going to make them? Or you get a little further and they go, are you sure? An old guy and an old lady to walk all the way across the desert and they're going to have a whole bunch of kids when they don't even have the ability to have kids anymore? You're going to take what guy and take him up onto the mountain? And you're going to give him rocks to write on? You kidding me? Now, you have to think from an angel's perspective. They don't die, as far as we can tell. They live within the counsel of God, but they're not God. They don't know what he's doing. They're not in the same mind. And so just like how many times in my own life my kids go, Dad, how come? And I go, I ain't going to explain it to you. You wouldn't get it. You know what I'm talking about? The angels, if I was an angel, and some of this is projecting because there's not a whole lot of biblical evidence, but if you're there, you're going, you're going to do what? You, creator of all this and me, are going to be a baby? Yes. Have you been hanging out near the incense a little too long? I don't know, this is a good idea. Are you sure? That's not going to end well. Yes, I know. See, the thing with the perpetual Father is he sees all of it, the good and the bad. And what the world wants to tell you is Christmas is about lights and trees and a jolly fat man without the story of where he came from. It's about presents. It's about spending more money that you have. It's about maxing out the credit card so that everybody can have a joyous occasion. It's about eating too much. Oh, and then there's that baby thing too, but it's just a baby. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And if you don't really like God as your father, that's fine too. I mean, maybe you had a bad father growing up or things weren't good with your father. Then if you just don't feel like that's a good thing, then you just take the Emmanuel name and that's good. The Wonderful Counselor, that's great. Mighty God, that's okay too. Prince of Peace, we can get along with that. But the Father part, if that just doesn't speak to you, you just go ahead and don't worry about it. I will tell you that is what the vast majority of the world is telling you in little subtle ways all of the time. In those moments where you don't like something because it just doesn't feel right, well, then just choose the feeling. I can still remember sitting at that Gateway computer as a little kid, 14 years old, playing the snake game. You know what I'm talking about? The snake goes around and it gets longer and longer and you can't eat yourself because that's not good, but you have to continue to eat the little apple things. Playing the snake game, my dad comes up and he rubs my shoulder. He goes, "Hey, bud, I just want to let you know I love you." And I go, "Yeah, okay, cool." And I'm like sucked into this game and I keep playing. An hour and a half later, I will never forget that morning. Days before Christmas. I can still tell you exactly how the snow sounded underneath the shoes of my feet. I can tell you the way the windows looked frosted over after an hour of sitting outside. I can tell you exactly every fine detail of horrific atrocity as I opened the door and saw a .410 shotgun. Days before Christmas. I can also tell you that all of the amazing stories I told you at the beginning would have never happened and they would have never been fathers to me had that horrific day before Christmas never happened. Now, do I like it? No. Do I wish it didn't happen? Absolutely. But do I understand a little bit more of what it means to be the perpetual father that has to make hard decisions? Ones that each and every one of us may not like. Ones that we have to stare into the abyss and the darkness and understand that a light dawns. And that light isn't an explosion. The people of Israel wanted a mighty king that would come and free them forever. And they got a baby. They wanted a huge boom, and they got the light creeps over the edge of the darkness. Just enough to give you hope. Just enough to remind you that he knows the strategy. That he knows what you need. He is mighty enough to do all things, and at the same time is there tender enough to say, I care, and I will protect you. You may not understand what that means, but this, a baby in a manger, was just the flicker of something bigger. This is the reminder that Isaiah is talking about, that the Apostle John sees on the island of Patmos of the day when Jesus fully comes, the day when we get to see angels that straddle the oceans. The day when glory and honor and power stand before all and every knee bows and every tongue confesses. Don't let this season stop the reality that this is a glimpse into the awesomeness that God has planned. That this is the glimpse that empathizes with your struggle. That if you think that Christmas is the joyous, most greatest holiday ever, you're right. But with that, it's also the most bipolar holiday ever. Because the reality is Christmas time is the most highest rate of depression, suicide, anxiety, and struggle. Because when everybody else has a smile on their face, that's when your smile just won't fake it anymore. But that's when you need to know that there is a Father and a Son in heaven that say, I have experienced what you have experienced. I have felt the darkness creep in. I have felt the angst and the struggle, and I want you to know I am here, everlasting. Let's pray. God, I ask that you would help us to see from your perspective, with your eyes, with your power in mind, that even in those moments when struggle sneaks, when pain seems overwhelming, when the hows and whats and the what next don't seem to be apparent, that you would let us know that from everlasting to everlasting, your protection and care is with us. That with every present we open, it's a reminder. With every light that we light on the wreath, with every twinkling light on the tree, it's a reminder that you, from beginning to end, have a plan. We don't know it. We may not like it, but it's yours. And from everlasting to everlasting, you are leading us through. Jesus, in your precious name, amen.